One of the Rebellion's most well-armed starfighters, the B-Wing, has been personally designed by Admiral Akbar. The B-Wing supports an array of weapons, including ion cannons, proton torpedo launchers, and laser cannons. Because the cockpit is surrounded by a unique gyro stabilization system, the pilot always remains stationary, even as the rest of the ship rotates during flight.
B-Wings, or as the cool kids call it, B-Wings! I'm hip to it, word to your mother, get jiggy with it and all that. Okay, this is a vertical scrolling shmup on the Famicom by Data East, and while I don't have a lot of history with Data East, the few games of theirs I have played pretty much paints them in a wholly negative light. But B-Wings here is actually kinda sorta competent, which for Data East is pretty impressive to me. But don't get your hopes up, Crisis Force, this game ain't. It's a very, very early shmup. Now the story puts you in the role of the last starfighter. You must go through all the various enemy barriers, enter their base, and blow up their boss monsters. And then get the high score, so that you can be abducted by aliens and become the last starfighter. And that's totally not the plot of a movie you absolutely need to see or anything. I completely made it up myself. Shut up. But go watch that movie. Because this is a shmup, it doesn't really have a story, but it does have something that, as a shmup, would make it better. Power-ups. Because as soon as you start the game, you're presented with a list of about a dozen different weapons that you can select to start out with and pick up along the way on your adventure. This is kind of a false choice, because, well, sure, you could pick any of the dozen that are available to you, you will always pick the hammer. Because, as the name would indicate, with the hammer, they can't touch this. It provides you with a shield that will last until you are dead, as well as give you access to firing wrecking balls at your opponent. So while yes, you could get like a 6-way gun that shoots little hearts out of your ship or something, why would you ever want that when you have a shield of invulnerability? Like, literally with the hammer, you have to intentionally try to get yourself killed, or accidentally perform that 1943-esque evasion maneuver that puts you on a different altitude, but abandons your equipment and makes you feel like a complete dumbass when you do it. But when you don't have weapons, that move's actually pretty good. Other than the weapon selection though, this is a very basic game. The backgrounds are primarily one solid color, and the level layouts themselves are pretty much the same. Don't get me wrong, the way they're structured is slightly differently, but they all function basically identically. Shoot enemies that come at you, blow up glowy bits of wall to enter the enemy's base, shoot at the giant wall of missiles the boss sends at you from somewhere. Seriously, no boss actually has a missile launcher as far as I've been able to find. And then blow up the glowing rainbowy bits of the boss that are like the glowing rainbowy bits of the wall, and then beat the boss. It's pretty much the same from level to level, although it does get a lot harder, and one of the biggest issues I've found with this game is that this is definitely one of those games that the moment you lose your power-up, it pretty much feels like all hope is lost. The nice thing is, if you die, it doesn't restart the level entirety, it'll just push you back a little bit from where you died, which is kind of okay, but all your progress past that point will be reset, so you gotta go through all the walls again. That's no fun. But really, once you lose that weapon, you might as well reset, because this game is definitely a game that relies on weapons. Or much, much more accurately, it's a game that has an over-reliance on MC Hammer. But that said, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. Sure, it's not the most visually attractive or anything, but, you know, it's competent, which is pretty impressive for Data East, at least for the few Data East games I've played. So, you know what? I'm still counting it as a win, and gameplay-wise, well, once you lose your weapon, you feel like, well, you might as well reset. When you have it, the game actually plays pretty well. The bosses are neat. Going through the walls makes you feel like you're really tearing down some kind of greater entity's fortress to just show how powerful you are, fighting off an alien army single-handedly, and then completely destroying an enemy piece by piece. And that's incredibly empowering and pretty impressive for a very simple NES shmup. If I had one other issue with the gameplay, it would be the real estate with which you can move around the screen, because you don't have full control of your actual on-screen movement. You can move anywhere to the left and right, near as I can tell, but vertically, you can only move about 3/4 up the screen. So if you want to get really close to the top of the screen to quickly dispatch things that are coming at you, you can't, because you'll be stopped at that 3/4 mark, which really does limit your evasion abilities. And weirdly enough, it seems like it kind of messes with your hitbox a little bit, because I had enemies flying through me when I was hanging out up there. I don't know, maybe this isn't the most well-programmed game ever. Now the presentation to Bwings is honestly just kind of substandard. I mean, there's a lot of enemies, although it's kind of hard to tell what each and every one of them is going to do based on their own appearance. I mean, there was this one guy I shot at that suddenly split into two and then homed in on me and killed me. And then there's others that just sort of avoid you for no reason. And then there's these wheel guys that seem to crush you but nothing happens. The bosses look really nice. I like the giant robot in the first level. I like the kind of crab-looking thing from the second level. And, well, sure, the backgrounds are basically one primary color. It still feels like it's doing its job. Sure, maybe it's not pushing the hardware. Sure, it's absolutely nowhere near Crisis Force levels of beauty, but it kind of sort of works, just barely. And the audio design is largely unremarkable. It really didn't feel like presentation was the focus of this game in its entirety, which seems pretty consistent with the rest of the game. It feels like gameplay was the focus, and while it is somewhat unbalanced, it still plays okay for a cheap early Famicom game. Now, if you want a copy of Bwings on the Famicom, it will not cost you all that much. In fact, it'll cost you maybe $5. And it plays like a game that'll cost you about $5. It's not gonna blow your mind, but it's decent. And for a cheap early Famicom game, that's not too bad. So if you want a cheap game, yeah, absolutely. If you want a super well-made game, save your pennies and get Crisis Force, because that game is amazing. This one, it's passable. It's not too bad. And again, for Data East, that's still pretty impressive to me. But maybe that means I need to play more Data East games.